Hi, and welcome to episode 3 of Creative Glue. Today, Scott dives into a conversation with photographers David Parker and Martine Perret. Now based in Margaret River, this dynamic duo of Emergence Aslumni unveil the creative magnetism of the southwest WA. From global connections to the local magic in the water, discover the essence that makes Margaret River an irresistible hub for creatives. Join us as we hear about the unique vibe of the Emergence Festival and uncover what sets it apart.
Creative glue. Your ideas and my ideas will stay together like glue. 'Cause we've got the creative glue.
Hello and welcome to Creative Glue, another episode where we're continuing to explore the common bond that brings creatives together, and as a part of our Emergence special series, how those bonds formed around the Emergence Creative Festival. Today, I'm chatting with David Parker and Martine Perret, both of whom are world-class photographers and, more importantly, Emergence Aslumni. David has become one of Australia's most highly regarded photojournalists and has covered many of the world's conflict zones, including the Middle East in the early 90s and the East Timor crisis of 99 and 2006. In 2003, David was commissioned by the Australian War Memorial as an official photographer to cover operations during the Second Gulf War. He was also the first official war photographer to be appointed by the memorial since the Second World War itself. Now, beyond journalism, his extensive portfolio in the film and performing arts include work with ABC TV, Film Australia, and productions like Jasper Jones, Cloud Street, and includes a couple of underbellies too. And that's only to name a few. He's a significant figure in the photographic community, with recent accolades including wins at the Australian Photography Awards and WA Media Awards, all of which underscore his impact on and beyond the battlefield. Now, Martine is a photographic artist who was born in Paris and now lives and works from her base in Margaret River with husband David. Martine is known for her startling, beautiful portrayal of the WA landscape, often employing aerial captures and portraiture to tell important stories of our times. Her approach to artistic work is based on a career in photojournalism, including a decade covering UN peacekeeping missions in conflict zones such as South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Burundi, Timor-Leste, and West Africa, where she documented the Ebola crisis. Now, in terms of what she's up to today, well, hopefully she can tell us a bit more on what we get into this thing. Welcome to you both.
Thank you,
Nice to be here, Scott.
Excellent. Fantastic. Now, in the theme of this podcast, I want to start by asking about the creative glue that binds the two of you together, which is obviously even a little bit more stronger than most.
Do you want to take the lead, babe?
Now you take the lead.
Well, we're actually, we're not in different locations. We're just in other rooms. So we're actually helping.
Fantastic. And how does that impact when you think on a creative level? Is the partnership part of what creates some creative glue for you guys?
Look, I think we're each other's sounding boards in a way. Martine has a lot of projects, a lot of ideas, probably a little bit more creative than I am. I'm a bit more nuts and bolts. But, if she has an idea, she'll run them by me and I'll ask for suggestions, and some occasionally listens to them. And so we do feed off each other, and occasionally we work together. We run, workshops for Indigenous communities and things occasionally, and so we certainly do work together. Like when the Emergence Festival, when they started, we were helping up with taking some pictures, and we'd work together on that. And we're definitely a team.
So tell me, Martine, which came first? Was it falling in love or working together?
Oh yeah, love at first sight.
I love it. Tell us more.
Yes, we met. I was working as a peacekeeping mission photographer. I was in Timor-Leste or East Timor. That was in 2007. And David was with two other journalists and photographers from Australia. We were covering the parliamentary elections in Timor-Leste. And the UN had organized some sort of drinks for the, Australians journalists and other journalists to come and mingle. And yeah, I spotted David, but I'll let him tell the rest of the story, which is pretty funny. But like, to come back to your first question as well, I think it's really great to be together as photographers because we understand one another. Sometimes you don't need to explain much because even though the work can be different, there's a lot of understanding of what we do. And I really love that. So it was not meant to be, in a sense, no. It's meant to be. What I'm saying is that we didn't plan it for it, but the fact that we are together, photographer, I think it's great. I couldn't think of any other way now.
And is that how the story really went, David?
No, pretty close. I mean, look, to be honest, we were friends for a few years before we decided we wanted to be together. I think we secretly liked each other, but life was complicated back then, and even though I really cared about her, I mean, I kind of loved having her as a friend, so I never wanted to complicate that. So it took quite a while before I realized. In fact, I was a guest at a festival in Phnom Penh, and Martine had asked me to mentor her, and then she turned up at the festival, and we were just wandering around the exhibitions, and it was a French photography festival, so she was translating, and it was just such a lovely place to be. And then at the end of it, we were in a tuk-tuk, and she said, "I don't want to be old, not tell you I've got feelings for you." And to be honest, I almost fell out of the bloody thing. I had no,
That's amazing. I love that.
But we had some unraveling to do, and we had some, things to resolve, and so we stayed friends, and then eventually we decided we wanted to be together, and we made that happen.
On the tuk-tuk note, I purposely booked the tuk-tuk for an hour, and when the guy turned and said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "I don't care, anywhere." Because I had planned to tell him, but I knew it would take a while for me to take the courage. I thought, oh, how am I going to approach that? So here we were around Phnom Penh, going around and around, and anyway, and then yes, exactly how David said, I just thought, oh well, I'll just jump into the pool and tell him I have feelings for him, and let's see what happens.
I love it.
The rest is history,
Yeah, so it was 6 years later that actually it took us 6 years before we moved to Margaret River anyway.
Yeah. And look, I want to definitely get to that because I think this is a really amazing part of the journey. And you touched on this before. What is it about being two photographers and working in the same part of the creative industry that you sort of works for you as a couple? Obviously, there's that understanding, but what are some of the other aspects that I guess really make that special and unique?
So firstly, like David said, because I did ask him earlier years ago to mentor me, I have a huge respect for his work, obviously, and how David works and his ethics and responsibilities. I was at the time towards photojournalism, but in general, in everything he does. So he's the first person I would always ask advice. Like if I'm, going toward a project and there could be complication, he's always the first person I trust to help me think about things I may not have thought of, or help me sort of, problems, sometimes technical problem. So I have this absolutely huge trust in David, and I really value his opinion. We have an amazing collection of books at home, that he has collected over the years as well, which is a great resource for our work. So yeah, absolutely. Without any questions, he's the first person who is also my friend, but my mentor always, actually.
Amazing. And David, I suppose, does the pressure and the environment of being in some of these, the type of photojournalism you've done is not the sort of your average everyday photos. I mean, I've been privileged enough to see a number of your pieces of work over the years, and it those situations are quite intense. With the both of you having been involved, I suppose, in those sorts of things, is that another part of that understanding in your creative process of what you're trying to capture and the stories that you're trying to tell that perhaps others wouldn't fully appreciate?
Look, I think, I've always struggled with taking photographs of people, especially without permission. I probably wouldn't make a very good street photographer because I've always got to have a purpose in taking images. So to point a camera at someone, it's always been one of the most difficult things you can do. You have to justify it in your head, and it's kind of like. And I work closely. When I work at a film set, I'll tend to use longer lenses because it's flattering for the actors. But when I work as a photojournalist, it's usually quite wide to standard type focal length, so that the people looking at the pictures feel like they're there. And when you're there, there's no mistaking why you're there, and it's almost kind of collaborative. But you don't want to influence what's happening in front of you, but you want people to understand why you're there, and the only way you can do that's by being in close. And I don't think I struggle with PTSD. I mean, I think Martine might have a better idea as to whether I do or not, but I think mostly it's because I've gone through life thinking, seeing people as survivors and not so much victims, and death is death, and life goes on, and it's pretty much that kind of thing that I'd like to focus on. So even though some of these things are traumatic, and especially covering things like the tsunami, where it's just an act of nature, there's no good guys and bad guys. That can be pretty difficult. So it is handy having Martine to come home to or to talk about those sort of things, because she's been through quite a lot herself. I think there's a reason we became instant friends. I mean, even when I'd visit and, our friends assumed we were having an affair when we weren't, little things like I'd get to go in a car, we'd be in a car and we'd be all traveling together, and people would leave the passenger side and I'd get in next to her in her Ford UN vehicle, and it was just an assumption that that's where I belonged. So it's kind of one of those little odd things, because I swear I had, until she mentioned that thing in the tuk-tuk, I had no idea she felt like that. I just knew that we really cared about each other as friends. So it's a symbiotic relationship. We're almost the same person. We even had similar tastes in clothes, and she doesn't wear shorts or thongs, and I don't wear shorts or thongs. Even if we're in Bali, it look like we're going to a combat zone then. And we've had people comment on that in cafes.
I love it. And then I suppose for you, Martine, like the Ebola crisis, I mean it's different to war, but it's still dramatically impactful, and having to capture that is almost hard to imagine.
I think a little bit like what David says. The first question really you want to ask yourself when you do something, any projects, or why are you doing that? That's the first question I ask myself. So whether it's a new project or why is it, what are the reasons and why I'm doing that? And then once I answer that, then I can really fully, go into some things. And yes, the Ebola was definitely the first I covered it twice. The first time in 2014 in West Africa for 3 months, and I went around different countries then. And the second time was in 2019, actually just before COVID really hit. And that was in the Congo, in the eastern part of the Congo. At that point, the Ebola actually vaccine had come out, actually, which I had to take, to do the work. In both cases, it was pretty daunting, and actually for different reasons. The first time in 2014, because no one really knew much about it. So we went into this, zone where it's, there was an article once who says the invisible enemy. And it's funny because it's a little bit like that, because you have no idea, you couldn't touch anything, you couldn't, hug anyone anymore, you couldn't, handshakes, we used to do the elbow. So it was a really strange time. So it was something very unusual. It was the first public emergency health UN mission that they had ever done, actually. So that was new as well. So it was a lot of things, a lot of unknown equation, And in the second time in the Congo, there was the added layer of very bad insecurity, actually. And it was a startup mission. And so I felt... I felt on edge the whole time. So it was very two different missions, but very interesting at the same time, but unusual context for sure. So unlike anything that I had done before, to be perfectly honest. Yeah.
And that invisible enemy hopefully put you in good stead for COVID once that came along as well, because we had that recent where the world's had to experience that in a different length.
Yeah, that was a horror.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously horrific for everybody involved. So, I'm really interested. I've been asking everybody this question, and I'm trying to find what it is that is the secret ingredient in creative glue. And in listening to the way that you guys take photos and that purpose, obviously working in an agency for essentially my whole life, storytelling has always been a critical part of what I've done and the agency's done. And having a purpose is always the critical piece of actually telling a story. And we obviously do it in very different ways, in different mechanisms. But is that part of the secret? Is the purpose and the storytelling part of the secret of the glue that brings creativity together, brings people to collaborate together? What are your thoughts around that?
I think that's everything, basically. We have a story together. We tell other people's stories. We reveal something of places that people might not get a better understanding of had we not been there. Even work in the film industry. I'm working in a creative industry that's telling stories, whether it's reality TV or drama or comedy. Or, in fact, I think being a photojournalist helped set me up to do stills work. In fact, the two have been hand in hand. I couldn't have done one without the other. But it's all storytelling. And, even Martine and I, we don't just share a love of photography. We share a love of films. I'm happy to watch subtitled films. I'm quite comfortable with that. So we get to learn more about French cinema, which I've always loved anyway. I've always been a bit of a francophile. My first main agency was a French agency, and my heroes were the French photographers in, Contact Images and Magnum. And so we have, we share our love of the creative, similar taste in music. She'll teach me something about the classical work, which I might not understand fully, and I'll share something about jazz or blues but that we accommodate each other with everything, and we have similar tastes. So, but the storytelling is the most integral part to what it is we do when we get up in the morning. It's not just about our story. It's about, as Martine, her work with Indigenous communities and some of the local ladies here that she's fallen in love with. It's about sharing that with others.
Absolutely. I think with the UN, for example, even with the UN, that common purpose, when everybody comes and work for the UN, it's, I guess in an ideal world, is you all look for bringing that peace and stability to a country. And that's the ideal. And I think a lot of my friends, and I know that the UN cope a lot of flack in different areas, but at the end of the day, a lot of my friends who were tireless workers, that's what they were all striving. We were all striving for that storytelling about you're trying to there to make a difference one way or another, somewhere in political affairs, some in civil affairs, some in, all sorts of ways. And so for me, that storytelling, even through the UN, was trying to bring out also interesting stories of people who are trying to make a difference, even on the ground, and not necessarily just the UN, the population as well. So it's always been at the core of what I do. Only when I came to Australia and changed completely my work, well, like David said, it's still what binds us together, that storytelling in a different way, but it's still trying to bring out stories to the light, which sometimes do not get that attention, so that's how
Definitely.
I feel.
And
And,
what
and that,
inspired? Sorry, David, you go.
just the ethics of actual factual storytelling too, keeping that in mind, so that things can't be misconstrued. And as Martine said, it's hard to prove sometimes or see evidence of having made a difference, but at least playing your part, even in a small way, is something that you're contributing to. But keeping that ethical sense of what's right, the truthful storytelling is an important thing that we've got to be more cautious of now with the introduction of AI and the dumbing down of mainstream media, or the criticism of mainstream media. I mean, I know it's still what we have, and like publications like New York Times and Washington Post, I understand what they verify, how verification is so important to them. But when you start losing sub editors and losing funding and people, it's very hard to turn a profit for some of the major publications. And we really can't afford to have that diluted in any way.
No, not at all. And Martine, you talked about there, that idea of a change since you've sort of come and settled in Australia and into Margaret River, and you've sort of taken to the air What inspired you to move from being quite comfortable on the ground to flying in the skies and not? I mean, drones have become so popular, and every man and his dog seems to have one. But you've actually taken to the air properly and captured, obviously, some spectacular images. Where did that inspiration come from, and the ideology behind that?
Well, to be honest, I mean, the work with the UN as well takes you into really remote corner of the world, and sometimes they're not accessible by road or too dangerous. Or so I used to fly quite a fair bit by UN helicopter. So I always had that bird's eye view for quite a number of years. I would sit at the back of the Mi-8, the old Russian helicopter that takes about 15 minutes to take off. It's an old beast, and I would open the back window and take a few, whatever I could. But my last UN mission was in South Sudan in 2013, and I left in December to be here in Margaret River, and it was a huge, obviously a huge change. It's like driving a really fast car and hitting a wall, and whoa, what am I going to do? But and one of the first thing I just wanted to do was, just to take a pulse of the region we decided to live in. And I don't know, I just thought, it would be nice to have these bird's eye view where we're going to live. So I started a couple of flights, and then it became a little bit a bug, and I did a few more, and I thought, that could become eventually a nice little project. And these days, I occasionally fly as well, either by Cessna or helicopter. But as you know, it's using resources and things. So I really limit to what I can do. We've got a drone as well, and I've done a few drone shots, but very different type of genre and work. But I love it, yeah. But I ended up adding, I suppose initially I just wanted to focus on the landscape side of things, so I didn't have to talk to anyone. I just really was focused on that landscape. And probably because I had so much, years of the UN where it was really complex and volatile environment, and I suppose I just needed a break from all of this. But eventually I got back into including that storytelling from people into, marrying that interconnectedness between the land and the people, which I thought was really beautiful. And WA is incredible from above. And that includes Margaret River, but also going to Salt Lakes, and the rest of WA is very stunning. So that really makes it, it helps tell a story in a different way, and to see that ancient land, those old cracked riverbeds, and when it reveals like that, you can add that to the storytelling in a very beautiful way, I think. So very lucky to call WA home, and especially Margaret River, of course.
Most definitely. And I mean, when it comes to this place we call home, the creative corner, as we affectionately call it, or the Margaret River region and the Southwest in general, it really has become a hotspot of sorts for creatives, I think. And for you two, I mean, you could have lived absolutely anywhere in the world, given your careers and your expertise. And I know that you still do a lot of travel too, but what is it that made you decide to call Margaret River home and be part of this creative corner?
Look, I think it was, when Martine had come to visit, it was just a place we'd fallen in love with. And when we were thinking about setting up a place together, I mean, in fact, it was affordable at the time, to be honest. We were looking at Fremantle and Perth, and I think it's just, I just thought that, well, why don't we think about that? Because we love the place so much. And most of our work's away anyway. It's not like I'd be driving out for a 10-minute drive from Perth to a job. It's usually parked in long-term car parks. So for an extra 2 or 3 hours drive to a long-term car park in Perth to catch a flight didn't seem that big a hurdle. So Martine, I think at the time we set up, but Martine was while she was still in the UN, in East Timor and South Sudan, and I started looking for places, and we were communicating via email, and and just made it happen. It just thought, well, let's just do that,
And after living in those remote corner of the world, which are pretty isolated, I felt I was not sure I could really live in the big city. So we had a place in Perth, but I felt like living in a smaller place would allow us to be closer to the community, which really happened. Actually, we're very sort of linked, with the community. And let's face it, Margaret River, it's like the world is coming to Margaret River. So we didn't need to
Sure
go as much
is.
to the world because there's so many festivals every month, the readers and writers, and I don't know,
Great live music scene.
Emergence Creative, the music, Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you get great
Well, I
bands.
mean, we haven't even touched on that, have we, David? I mean, you're not just a photographer, but a very accomplished guitarist, and you'd like to have a shred every now and then.
If accomplished means rough and ready, is that? Yes.
Well, I mean, it is called the Doghouse Collective for a reason, isn't it? So,
That's a Matt Lewis thing for sure. Doghouse
Lo-
Collective. No, it is fun. We have played. When they're not getting complaints, we're happy to play at Sea Gardens. That's one of my favourite venues ever, and it's got a less discerning crew that come along to have a listen, and it's just fun. Matty brings some of his mates in, and they'll get up and have a jam. It's almost like an open mic night some nights. So no, it's a great outlet. Music is my first love, and I spend a lot of money on fuzz pedals and guitars, and
I think we all do that. I mean, for those that don't know, the Doghouse Collective is a band of the festival director Matt Lewis's doing, I think, and the claim to fame is never the same song, never the same lineup. Is that the tag?
Look, and he's a beating heart of the thing. He's laying down his bass grooves, and whoever's
As
available.
every bass player should. I would tell you that, wouldn't I?
You would. Well, mate, you're a pretty decent musician yourself. You've got to come down and sit in. There's always room for another bass player.
We will have to make that happen. I've got a feeling there might be some jams across Emergence, so which will be fantastic.
I don't think I'll be here, though, unfortunately. I think I'm going to be away.
Oh no, that's no good.
No,
but I mean, it is true to say that there are so many creative people that get drawn to this region.
Well, I've got close friends here as well that work in the film industry, and they live here. So it's kind of
yeah.
And you
I
tell
mean, what is it?
River,
you tell
somebody live in Margaret River, and they take a step back. They just do.
Yeah.
So it's like
everybody wants to.
Well, everybody wants to, and it's getting harder to do that.
Yeah.
It's taken on some sort of it's a mythical place, and we're just happy that it's a piece of our reality. So we're lucky with that.
Well, even when I was in East Timor, my colleagues at the time were already talking about Margaret River, and I had no idea. Actually, I had never really heard about it until they mentioned it. So I started Googling and searching. I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. Because I come from, Bordeaux and Arcachon, which is also, a wine region near the sea. There's a bit of surf as well, further down south, the region. And so there was a lot of similarity. And in fact, David, you came from Rosebud, Sorrento area, and it's also, on the footstep of the Mornington. So we kind of have that link as well.
Yeah, I grew up in a small surfing place as well, Sorrento and Rosebud, and I was educated there. And Mornington Peninsula is not that dissimilar to here. And when I came to Durham, it was probably well over 30 years ago. And the thing about Martine is you just only have to mention something. She gets that spark in her eye, and then it just happens, I'm an R for a while, but then I see that look in her eyes, and then you just think, okay, let's just do it,
It's happening. I might as well get on the bus.
Yeah.
And so you're both obviously very involved in the community. You've had some amazing projects. Is there anything that you're up to, at the moment that you can tell us about?
I'm working full time. I've got 2 or 3 productions I'm going on to, so it's been back-to-back film productions. So I've been away quite a bit. Although we had, recently came off The Surfer with Nicolas Cage, and luckily that was in Yellingup, and we had some local crew working on that.
Nice gig to get at home.
Great. Yeah, it's great. So we had some Margaret River locals working on that with Shelby Shaw and Mark Boscawl and John Fairhead, and so it's good to have a place only like 40 minutes drive for a change.
Yeah,
so there's other productions coming down, which is great. So, keep an ear open and eyes open for that.
And what about you, Martine?
More personal projects than I have.
Yes, well, I've got a few projects with the North Midland project, actually, and Meridian with the Meridian Arts as well. And then I'm working on some personal project aiming around the Margaret River Open Studios, and later on hopefully. But then I won't talk yet about it until it's fully confirmed. But yeah, I'm working on a few projects at the moment which are really exciting for me. So I always feel like, you lit little fires, and sometimes take off big, and sometimes they stay latent for quite a while. So I've got a few fires at the moment, and I'm just hoping that they will light, hopefully not all at the same time. That could become sometimes complicated. Sometimes that's what it is as well. Like last year, I felt was more a lot of standby, and that can be sometimes annoying. But then sometimes everything comes at once as well. So, I mean, it's typical freelance life. You kind of multitasking different things and hoping that you can juggle them all. But yeah, no, lots of exciting, cool things actually. So that's what I like with the region. I always constantly get inspired. Sometimes I almost need to okay, I'll need to slow down a little bit, because one idea pops, another idea pops, and it's the beauty of this region. There's constant, creatives to bounce back ideas sometimes, and I don't know, it's just really inspiring. And you jump into the car, and 10 minutes later you're near, the Cape to Cape track, and you've got the Boreal forest. I don't know, there's beautiful environment to inspire as well.
Yeah, world's best
It's
beaches.
non-stop. It's been beautiful, actually. The transition from the UN, I was very worried of. Actually, I just realized this sort of beautiful emergence of creation has sparked, and that's been great. And then
And
there's
that's
the
a
emergence.
perfect segue for the Emergence Creative Festival. So,
There you
I mean,
go.
you've both been involved in various ways across the years, and sounds like David's going to be a little bit too busy for this year's festival. But
I'll have to
Martine,
double check
you
the
going to be
dates. But
around?
Maybe
Well,
not. Maybe.
19th to the 22nd. So
Yes,
4
yes.
days of festival for,
yeah,
no, I was going to say something else. Fun. We'll go with that. So
The
hopefully
buzz
you
and
guys
the
are, I mean, most of the people I've talked to so far as part of the alumni, are hailing the return after a 5-year hiatus. Is it something you guys are particularly excited to see come back to the creative scene and to the
look,
region?
it's
absolutely.
such a great introduction for us to the region as well. I mean, it was wonderful, and creatives from around the world. I mean, there's no, it's a lot of effort putting this sort of thing together. But I mean, even the alumni, as you say, they go on to different parts of the world, and they were ambassadors for the Emergence Festival. They're also positive about their experiences, and that's no small thing. I don't think you can always measure something like that by how many participants there are, but the quality of the participants was extraordinary.
No,
We
it's
learned something. People from different fields. It was just they were wonderful.
you
And
always
that's
learn
something
from
we hear.
someone, even though it may not be your field, right? But there's
Yeah,
always someone bringing something to the table you may have not thought of, but I always felt re-energized and inspired, and all those creative juices flowing up and down, during the festival. So, but like David said, no doubt it's a lot of work to pull that together. So kudos to the team and everyone around that, and yourself. But yeah, looking forward to hopefully be part of it one way or another. Attending some of those great workshop talks, keynote talks, and all of this. Yeah, so very much
yeah. And I'll
looking.
double check my dates to make sure I've got that. Be nice if I could be around, but it's hard to be in two places at once.
Apparently impossible. I've tried it many times
I
before,
know.
so we'd love to see you both there, and certainly that diversity is something that's been a strong emphasis for Emergence across all of its years, and I think it's continues to be a thematic that people love about it. It's
Yeah,
not just a singular genre or particular part of the creative industries. It really is all of the creative industries coming together, and people being able to be inspired by each other from various areas and disciplines, and I think that's just fantastic.
well, it is. It's certainly a labour of love for the people involved. You can see that, and that impresses.
Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt about it. There's a lot of love, blood, sweat, and tears that goes
Yeah.
into creating a festival like Emergence.
Oh, mate,
But
that symbolises humanity in general. Love, blood, sweat,
yeah,
and tears is what it is. But there are a lot of good laughs to be had as well.
yeah, and it's humbling to see people come and drop their guard and just get back to the roots of their creativity and sort of join together and that great equalizer that Margaret
Yeah.
River is at times. So
Yeah, there's wonderful idealism as part of the festival too. I just think they talk about personal projects, not just their everyday work, which I found that, that was
Definitely.
inspiring. So,
Yeah. And, with all your experience, having been to many of the festivals, we're making sure that we hear from the alumni about what it is that they would give as a bit of a tip to our first timers. Anybody that hasn't had the glorious experience of being at Emergence before, what top tip would you give those first timers coming to the festival?
go with the flow.
Go with the flow.
That's all
Start
you
with
can do,
your
really.
creative crawl.
Leave your ego outside. Leave your ego outside and go with the flow, and just, it's a natural fit for everybody, I think. So, you could have people that have made millions out of doing what they do, and some from humble origins, and they're all treated equally at the festival. So just go with the flow and have fun.
I love
Yeah,
it.
and have a complete open mind because, like
Yeah.
I said, like there are some people you read the bio and like, oh, maybe it's not for me, but then you hear them and then you can take home, some points, even though it may not be exactly so I think you have to have a really big open mind, and the rest will just flow, and it's a lot of fun. You really, I think everybody is kind of really relaxed during this festival. They all come together, share inside, and that's the beauty of it. So yeah, very much. And that creative crawl, I love it. I hope they'll bring it back this year. I'm not sure, but that's a
It's
lot of
certainly a
fun.
way to start it, isn't it?
It's a
Well, it's
great,
always something to look forward to. You do pack a lot in.
yeah.
Most definitely. Well, look, thank you both so much for joining us today. That's all we have time for on this episode of Creative Glue, but join us each week in the lead up to Emergence for more alumni guests and the glue that brings it all together. If you haven't already, check out the Emergence website, emergencecreative.com, and make sure you get yourself a pass. I certainly can't wait to get there. That's it for today. So, Lucy, who'll be joining us on Creative Glue next week?
So next week, Scott catches up with Glenn Sarangapani, creative director and composer at Panda Candy, who also happens to be one of his good mates. You can probably guess Glenn and Scott first connected at Emergence Festival. With a history of lighting up stages around the world with acts like Birds of Tokyo, Muse and Bon Jovi, plus a trove of multi-platinum hits and awards, Glenn's deep music industry knowledge and magnetic personality make him a true creative force. So tune in for an enlightening conversation with Glenn, where he'll share his journey, the craft of songwriting, and the role of storytelling through music. Thanks again for making space, and keep an eye on our socials for more details and the next episode of Creative Glue. Another Emergence special.